Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something I think a lot of people grapple with, maybe quietly.
Hmm.
It's that feeling of being down, even depressed, when, on paper, everything looks pretty good. Spouse, kids, a job, the whole picture seems fine.
Yeah, it's a really confusing place to be and often isolating because you might feel like, what's wrong with me? I should be happy.
Exactly. That feeling of should. So, the mission for this deep dive is to explore some of the possible reasons behind that disconnect. Why is the outside not match the inside sometimes?
And we'll be drawing on some interesting perspectives here, insights from Jewish thought, psychology, personal growth texts.
Right. We're aiming for insights, maybe some pathways to understanding, not just, easy answers.
Absolutely. So maybe let's start with that idea itself, that everything is fine picture. The sources really push back on the idea that external stuff automatically equals internal happiness.
Yeah, it's not that simple. Like, we're more complex than just the sum of our circumstances.
Precisely. Some texts talk about us having different layers. You've got the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, maybe even the spiritual layer.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the physical stuff, the things people see, look okay, something deeper might be, well, off.
Like a house that looks great outside, but maybe the plumbing's faulty or something.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. The surface looks fine, but another level has issues you can't immediately see.
Okay, that makes sense. We do tend to focus on what's visible. What about this other concept from the sources, this idea of a divine flow, right? How does that connect?
Right, the Shefa Iloki. So the idea is there's this kind of constant flow of blessing or abundance
Mm.
meant to reach and nourish our soul.
Okay, like spiritual nourishment.
Exactly. But for that flow to reach us properly, it needs clear channels.
Hmm.
The texts call them tools or garments, kelim and levushim.
Tools and garments, like conduits.
Sort of, yeah. They're the means through which this flow moves from the soul out into our experience, into our bodies, our actions. Now, if these channels, these garments, get blocked or damaged,
Ah, then the flow gets disrupted.
exactly,
Yeah.
even if life externally looks good, that inner nourishment isn't getting through properly. And that can lead straight to feelings of distress, emptiness, even depression. The tools are blocked, as the text puts it.
So it's less about what's happening around me and more about my internal capacity to receive.
That seems to be a key idea, yes. And importantly, the sources suggest these garments, these channels, are really shaped by our early life.
Our childhood.
Yeah, experiences back then can create blockages that we still carry. One text hints that the consequences of those early stages are profound, suggesting that even if something happened long ago, it can still make it difficult for a person to navigate life today.
Wow. So past stuff isn't necessarily past.
It can echo in our present internal structure, you could say.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. There's this concept of dot. It's translated as knowledge, but the sources describe it more as a power of connection.
Yes.
Yes, Coach Hachiper. It's presented as this really fundamental ability to connect things.
Connect what exactly?
Well, different parts of ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, making them coherent. But it also connects us outward to other people, to our environment, maybe to a sense of purpose.
Okay, so it's like the glue.
Kind of, yeah. It
Got-
bridges the internal and the external. The texts mention these connections, connection to self, connection to the environment. If that power of connection dot is weak or somehow damaged,
Then even with a good job and family, you might feel adrift, empty.
exactly. That lack of connection, whether it's to yourself, others, or purpose, can really manifest as that depression we're talking about, even when the external structure seems solid.
So you could have the spouse and kids, but if the actual connection isn't there,
Or if you feel fundamentally disconnected from your own self, your own core, that's a big factor. And the sources link this back to childhood too, don't they? The family environment.
they do. They point out that growing up in a home where, say, there isn't harmony between the parents, maybe lack of respect, constant disagreement, unclear authority,
Yeah.
well, that kind of environment can actually hinder the healthy development of this connecting power, this det Brennett, in a child. The text uses quite strong language, saying the child is essentially harmed in their core sense of balance and harmony.
So the foundation for feeling connected gets weakened early on.
It seems that's the implication. It makes it harder to integrate experiences, to feel whole and connected later on.
That's powerful. Okay, what about habits? How do our habits play into this?
This is really interesting. The sources suggest that habits can become so ingrained, so automatic, they operate almost above our conscious thought.
Above our intellect.
Yeah, that's the phrasing used. It means we can get locked into patterns of thinking or behaving without even realizing it, and we just assume, well, this is just how I am.
And that might be a lie.
The text explicitly calls it a lie. It says this feeling of this is just me often comes from the ego, from what we've just gotten used to, not from our true self.
So I might have a habit of negative self-talk, for example, and it's so automatic I don't connect it to why I feel perpetually down.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Or maybe a habit of avoiding connection or seeking validation in the wrong places. It becomes autopilot. And that autopilot might be steering you into a ditch, subtly.
And the sources mentioned the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, leveraging these habits.
Yeah, the idea is that this inclination towards negativity or distraction can kind of exploit these blind spots created by habit. It uses them to pull us away from what we truly need, from our purpose. The text asks, how does it manage to hide this from us? Are we foolish?
And the answer is,
Because habit operates above conscious reason. It clouds our judgment.
okay. This idea of purpose, Shlishet, comes up again. How critical is feeling disconnected from your mission or purpose?
It seems very critical according to these texts. The idea is everyone has a unique purpose, a reason for being here. If you're not aligned with that, or don't even know what it is, it can create a deep-seated unease or depression.
Even if you're successful by worldly standards.
Yes, because external success doesn't necessarily fulfill that inner need for meaning and purpose. There's an anecdote mentioned about someone being told their struggles were actually part of their unique mission.
Right, and they found that really hard to accept.
Extremely hard. The text says the person understood it intellectually, with their head, but couldn't bring it down into their heart, couldn't feel it emotionally.
That gap between head and heart seems really relevant here.
It really does. It highlights how knowing something isn't the same as internalizing it and living it.
What about this phrase, a trap of personal empowerment? What's that getting at?
I think it's cautioning against focusing only on external self-improvement, like career goals or skills, while neglecting the deeper inner work.
Like polishing the brass on the Titanic?
Maybe. It's like you can empower yourself externally all you want, but if the inner foundation, the connections, the sense of purpose, dealing with past wounds isn't addressed, it's ultimately not going to bring lasting peace. It can be a trap.
And that connects to the emphasis on peace in the home.
Definitely. The sources are really clear on this. One text basically says, if you want to help someone struggling, the first thing to ask about is their home life, their primary relationship.
Why first?
Because if there are major problems there, conflict, disconnect, it acts like a fundamental blockage. Trying to fix other things might be impossible until that first barrier is addressed. It's foundational.
Okay. So for a listener, for anyone feeling this way, depressed despite things looking good, and they want to figure out why, to find the root cause, where do they begin?
That's the crucial step. The sources point towards introspection, an accounting of the soul, really looking inward.
Taking stock.
Exactly. Examining your thoughts, your ways, as one quoted passage suggests. But where to start looking? Well, remember those garments we talked about?
The ones shaped by early life.
Yes. The texts say we receive these from our environment early on. So, reflecting on your upbringing, key relationships, significant past experiences, that's often a necessary part of the process.
But that can be hard. Things can be fuzzy, or we might not want to look there.
Absolutely. And the texts acknowledge this with the idea of screens or veils.
Screens?
Yeah, things that obscure the truth. That might come from our imagination, our ingrained beliefs, past hurts. They act like filters that prevent us from seeing the real reasons for our distress.
So how do we get past these screens? How do we clear the fog to see the root cause?
One key way mentioned is connecting to wisdom, seeking a deeper understanding that goes beyond our immediate feelings or assumptions. The idea is that connecting to wisdom helps remove those screens of imagination.
Seeking truth.
Seeking a clearer, more objective perspective. It often involves a degree of humility or self-nullification, letting go of our ego's need to be right or to stick to old narratives.
Okay, so introspection, looking at the past, trying to see past our own biases. Are there other practical paths forward?
Yes, several are suggested. One, surprisingly maybe, is helping others.
How does that help you?
The texts suggest that when you facilitate flow for others, it opens up the flow for you too. People who started helping others reported their own lives getting sorted out. It shifts the focus outward in a positive way.
Interesting. What else?
Seeking that knowledge, that connection, that understanding from a trusted source is huge.
Like a therapist or a mentor.
Could be, yeah. A professional, a guide, someone who can offer perspective. There's a lovely analogy used. A child falls, gets hurt, and runs to their mother, not because she can magically take the pain away.
Well, because
Because in that moment of hurt, the child has lost their dot, their sense of connection and grounding. The mother helps restore that. Seeking guidance is like seeking that restoration of clarity and connection.
finding someone to help you reconnect the dots.
Exactly. And finally, there's this idea of shifting from purely human intellect to a more divine or deeper intellect, often through qualities like simplicity, sincerity, earnestness,
Moving beyond just logic to something deeper.
perhaps. It's about accessing a different kind of understanding, one less cluttered by ego and habit.
So it sounds like understanding this kind of depression isn't about finding one single cause, but maybe understanding a complex interplay of factors, inner blockages, connection issues, habits, lack of purpose.
That seems right. It's about recognizing that the feeling itself, the depression when things seem fine, is a valid signal. It's pointing towards something deeper that needs attention.
It's not something to just dismiss because your life looks good on the outside.
Definitely not. It's an invitation to understand those different layers of yourself, the potential disruptions, the power of connection, the hold of habit, the call of purpose.
So for someone wanting to know how to find the cause, the path involves that honest self-look, considering the past, questioning patterns, and maybe, crucially, seeking knowledgeable guidance to help navigate those internal screens and find real clarity.
Precisely. It's about embarking on a journey inward, going beyond the surface level of life.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener. Could this feeling of disconnect, this sadness, even when things seem okay, actually be an invitation? An invitation to explore a deeper part of yourself, your connections, your purpose. Perhaps the very fact that things are okay on the outside gives you the stability needed to finally turn inward and address those hidden needs, ultimately uncovering a more profound, more authentic well-being than you've known before.